Hello everybody, and welcome back to another Future of the Fortress. This is a monthly Q&A hosted by Tarn Adams on the Bay 12 forums, covering everything related to Dwarf Fortress. These range from questions about current development, occasional bug fixes, as well as discussions as to what's currently being worked on. And sometimes they become community brainstorming sessions talking about far-off features that have yet to materialize. Alongside of the forum post, I usually start with the monthly report, which is Tarn kind of looking back on the previous month and explaining how things have been. As far as the future of the fortress itself, if you'd like to take part in these discussions, there's a link to the forum thread in the description of this video. So let's dive in with the monthly report. June 1st, 2025. Tarn writes, May was pretty rough. I was sick for 3 weeks and couldn't work, but I got started on a big ranged weapon rework late in the month, and that will continue into June. This will get us moved forward on the siege defense, but also be able to be released as a part of a near-term routine update to get us back on track there. About 8,000 units in May have been sold, another relaxed month with no big sales, holding steady. And let's dive into the future of the fortress. Thank you, Tarn. And a question from Urist McSaddist, and they ask, are we going to see nobles and administrators be expanded upon once the villain stuff is resumed? It would be neat if we got more varied noble demands, like ban a certain religion, or build a bigger temple for another, or go to war with the elves. And Tarn's response is, I'm not sure if it'll be villains or entity and fort and scenario stuff that trickles in now that arcs are gone. But I imagine there will be more structures related to the sorts of purposes forts have. And also, there are all those world gem positions that exist that come in with villains that don't have functions that need to be finished. Another question from Urist McSaddist, and they say, and a follow-up from Urist the McSaddist, and they say, are we going to see services expanded in the foreseeable future? Sorry if this is too much of a suggestion, but I would like to actually get paid in coins by visitors coming to my tavern, and then use those coins as trade goods on the next caravan. And Tarn's response is, the economy is still sitting out there as a thing that needs to be done. I'm not sure when. Traditionally, it was put after the entity rewrite stuff and aligned with boats, but it's not clear now. That's all been shaken up a bit. The next question comes in from Slow Person, and they say, what, if any, cross-integration is the siege update expected to have with the justice system? To put it another way, will the smartest siegers try to use pre-placed infiltrators to unlock gates, instead of just trying to hide in a giant wooden horse or rabbit to get in? The reason I mention the justice system is because I would assume this would be used to catch said infiltrators. Apologies if this has already been asked or answered. It's hard to keep track of something asked like 6 months ago. And Tarn's response is, the justice-related notes currently include infiltrators and also treatment of prisoners. And a question from Vanzetti, and they say, do you think there could be value in having a realistic mining mode, which preserves volume? So all material you dig out has to go somewhere, and naturally you can't walk through the mined-out material, necessitating mounds of tailings and spoil tips and various mining waste, etc. Or would this just make the game harder without adding anything? And because Tarn quotes Eric Blank, I will read their response first. With regards to the siege stuff, he wanted to prevent tunneling invaders, completely turning your map into Swiss cheese, and preventing some form of tailings or rubble piles from those operations might fit the bill, allowing you to fill back in holes tunnelers have dug. And Tarn's response is, this has been suggested for a long time. And while I think it would be interesting, it isn't a high priority, because it would just slow down the game a great deal. As Eric Blank mentioned, digging invaders, especially versus soil, might still lead to some changes along those lines, since soil can't currently be recovered. And a longer question from Vailwin, and they say, I occasionally rewatch the May 2016 talk on procedural generation, especially the part about the prototype for generating myths and magic. I still find it absolutely fascinating. Once this feature is added to the game, will we be able to read about the creation of the world, magic, and myths in Legends mode for our worlds? Or will that information be entirely hidden from the player? One of the things I love most is reading the events and stories the game generates in Legends, so it would be amazing to see those mythological and magical elements included there too. And Tarn's response is, we used to hide more Legends entries, but we've moved away from that. This will be another time where I think the default will be to show everything. But there's also a place for certain mysteries, especially when you can actively try to unravel them. Legends mode has leaned towards showing everything though, including vampire infiltrators, etc. We're also considering how myth generation is going to affect world generation, and how we might do some exposition there, instead of just having more technical readout followed by the event tracker. A question from a curious cat who probably knocked over the shampoo bottle, and they say, I seem to remember there were plans to change workshops into zones. Is that still the plan? Also, what about bedrooms, dining rooms, offices, throne rooms, and other rooms? And Tarn's response is, yeah, it's been a long-term goal to get workshops to be more flexible, with furniture elements inside a zone. I don't have a specific list of furniture there, though, and I'm not knowledgeable, so it's suffering the same delay as expanding adventure mode crafting in that way. Adventurers using standard workshops will probably be first at this point. A question from the Marmot, and they say, will the siege rework make it so that fortresses aren't attacked every single season? It would be annoying to refill holes made by tunneling enemies every season once the player gets enough wealth to attract hostile enemies, until the enemy civilization loses most of its manpower. And Tarn's response is, yeah, we're going to look at the attack schedule as part of the overall overhaul. Question from Gino Raven, and they say, is there plans to make different walls of constructed materials harder for sieges to deal with? What about fortification walls versus solid ones? For example, steel walls versus clay boulder walls. At the same time, naturally generated sand walls should be trivial to dig through, compared to most constructed walls. And Tarn's response is, yeah, they'll be treated differently. We're also adding metal reinforced walls, which will be much harder for invaders to get through. And a question from not Rex but Caesar, and they say, will we ever get full keyboard control in the Steam version? I miss being able to make a stockpile without using the mouse. And Tarn's response is, we're going to try to get this in with the widgetization. The widgetization! I'll leave that in. We're going to try and get this in with the widgetization of the UI. This is on hold until the Lua stuff is out the door, which shouldn't be too far away. At this point, we'll have to take a look at our technical priorities. And a question from the username that everyone loves to hear me say, Dick Butt Degrate, and they say, what's with all these primordial rocks, T-Dog? Do these do anything yet, or are we just donating them all to the procedural sewer cultists in exchange for brownie points? Rather important, since I have a custom reaction that lets me turn these presumably useless primordial small stones into artifact battle axes in adventure mode. Is this going to dick punch me out of accessing hidden content in the future? Prefers ambiguity over substance here. And Tarn's response is, we needed something reliable for the chosen tutorialization, but ultimately I think it was disappointing. We're just going to have to wait for proper myth and magic stuff for those to be realized. You can do what you like with them, but presumably these primordial bits will be useful in the future beyond the faction rep. And Catman3 says, why do birch trees have dark wood in graphics? They have white wood and bark. This is a continual disaster and the game is ruined. Full stop, all caps. In all seriousness, though, there is some noticeable but somewhat minor errors in the accuracy in some graphics, namely colors of different types of wood. The biggest and most blatant example being birch wood. Real birch trees have a very distinct wood and bark, which are literally white in color. However, they are ironically depicted in the graphics among the darkest brown wood in the game. Are there any plans on retreading graphical elements for misses such as this, or are they minor enough not to matter? More importantly, I gotta ask, are there currently any plans regarding additional physical descriptions and portrait features for races other than dwarves? There were those unused goblin portraits with different hairstyles, so I assume it's at least coming somewhere down the line. I apologize if I missed some comment about the topic you've made earlier. And Tarn's response is, regarding trees, the link is dead in the raws, so I'm not sure what the source was. The heartwood can be dark, I guess, but most of the wood should be lighter, and pref string already calls out the light bark color. I lived around birch trees, and I have no idea when we'll revisit any of this. As far as portraits go, we have more portrait stuff prepared, yes. Portraits for the non-intelligent creatures and also some stuff with animal people. The Goblin Hair logjam is coming from the verbal styles not being defined to match the pictures. A question from Volleylol, and they say, there hasn't been any Steam announcements in May, unless the last 2 days drop a surprise one. Is there a special reason for that? Example, the Siege stuff being full of secrets, or life development keeping you busier than usual? Or can we expect announcements to be further and fewer between in general going forward? It would be a shame. I think following the development is fun. And Tarn's response is, yeah, I was sick. I simply didn't have anything to report. Everybody else has been getting things done, so it isn't a lost month. But it didn't cohere into the announcement. So hopefully that'll change soon. And that brings us to the end of this month's Future of the Fortress. I just wanted to say a real quick thank you for taking the time to listen to this one. Just a real quick shout here at the end. If you are an old Dwarf Fortress enjoyer and have listened to many episodes of Tarn's old podcast, DF Talk, hosted by Rainseeker and Captain Tastic, one of their old guest hosts, Epion, who is the developer of Doom the Roguelike, is currently remaking his old game as Jupiter Hell Classic. This is essentially a Doom fan game from the early 2000s, remade with a legally distinct skin. It's got a good punch to it and very easy to pick up, so if you're at all interested in traditional roguelikes or turn-based roguelikes, I highly recommend you check out the demo. I'm trying to spotlight it here because I don't really have a better place to do it, and I'm hoping this will maybe get some extra eyes on the thing. So if you haven't heard of it or tried it before, please go try out the demo on Steam. And if you enjoy it, leave a review for the demo, because Steam is nuts now and just about as algorithm built as YouTube. So if you want to help out a game you like, go leave a review. So go try out that demo and let the devs know what you thought. Maybe let them know I sent you. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.